topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. If you've been following my show, you know that I feature different aspects of human diversity almost every week, but I also feature really important shows about climate change and mitigation and solutions to help us all become more aware and more able to know that we can do things to help prevent climate change. And that's what this show is all about. But before I introduce my guests, and I have an amazing panel of guests today, let me just mention for anyone interested in finding my workshops or classes, you can go to my website, which is knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. So today's show is all about bringing hope and to use the words of the creator of this project, who is Julia Levine, hope in a time of dread. And Julia Levine can maybe give a nod or something so people know who you are. Is Poet Laureate of Davis and an American Academy Poet Laureate. And Julia, when we go back to you to talk about how this brainchild came to you, I would love you to add more about your bio, but first let me introduce everyone else. We also have Alison Kimmel, who's a 7th grade teacher who teaches health and electives and has a master's degree, I believe, in education, and she's a credential special ed teacher and an amazing human being. And I'm just going to say here, Alison Kimmel, I want everybody to know you have been teaching for over 30 years. That is remarkable. That is remarkable. Just, so thank you and congratulate you. And boy, we're so lucky that more students still have you as a teacher.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And next I'm going to introduce Amy Hannon-Korynta, who's a 7th grade science teacher and tell me if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, you all have master's degrees. She's a BS in science and technology and a master's in education. Amy, thank you for also being here. And we have Anna Kieschnick, a 7th grade world studies English teacher with a BA in communications and linguistics and a master's in education. So look at all this expertise and brilliance we have already. So Julia, I want to go back to you before we start with what is this project you conceived called Hope River. First, tell us a little bit more about your background, because my introduction of you was not adequate.
Okay. Well, so I'm a poet, and I have a lot of awards and collections of poetries. The last two, Small Disasters Seen in Sunlight, won the Northern California Award in Poetry. And my very latest one, Ordinary Psalms, was a winner of a Nautilus Award. I also was awarded the American Academy of Poetry Fellow Laureateship Award to do this project that we're going to talk about. My day job was as a clinical psychologist for children and adolescents, and I got my PhD in clinical psychology from UC Berkeley, and I have an MFA from the Pacific University in Oregon.
Wow. So impressive. And it's amazing to see someone so clearly using art to create positive change and to just be manifesting it. It's so impressive and encouraging. So thank you for adding more to let us know more about who you are. So to continue with Julia, so how did this project you designed called Hope River come to you?
Well, first, you have to be a poet laureate. So I was chosen as the poet laureate for Davis, not in the September of 2022. And my platform was poetry of the Anthropocene. And particularly, I was interested in working with groups in Davis that were working to mitigate climate change or working against social injustice in regards to climate change. And my first year, I had always considered myself working with adults, which I did and I loved. The groups were just amazing that I worked with. But the second year, I knew I wanted to work with kids because I had had experiences in my last few years during the pandemic of watching kids really, really suddenly do badly. Suddenly, they went from being where I'd worked with them to a really good place to ending up in inpatient units and having lots of suicidal ideation. And the more I talked to the kids, the more I realized that a lot of them just felt like giving up on the future because it all looked so bleak to them and so overwhelming. And I thought, boy, is there some way as poet laureate I can address this dread these kids are feeling and turn it into some level of hope? Because without their hope, they're not going to be interested in contributing to the future. And that's a really bad place for us to be in 20 years from now. We need them. They're who we need. And I knew that a lot of these kids, because of my years and years of working with them, got all of their news and information from social media, and that it wasn't necessarily the same news I was getting. And it's certainly, even as an adult, it's not easy to find hopeful news about the climate. You have to really look for it. So I decided to do a project that would combine a sense of hope, a sense of their own voices, because I feel like kids never on these subjects get listened to. No one says, what do you think about this? And I really wanted that to be part of this. And then I wanted technology to make it interesting. So I wanted to have all three parts in there to get the kids really involved, to get the kids heard, and to give the kids a sense of hope. And when I applied for this fellowship, I was both thrilled and terrified that I got it, because I was like, oh my God, it's a great idea, but now I actually have to do it. And I'm really good at ideas and I'm not so good at doing. So it's a miracle. The only reason I pulled it off is because of Alison and Amy and Anna, and because of this amazing friend I have who did a lot of the technology work.
Wow. Okay, let's move over to Alison, because I know that when she first mentioned this to me, she said, well, a dear friend has come up with this brilliant idea, and I think I can help her make this happen. So Alison, tell us about your role in this.
Julia came to me, I think, initially to just say, hey, I have this wild idea. Do you think you could help connect me with someone to make this happen? And I said, oh, pick me after I heard the project, because I was like, oh yeah, no, right here. This is where you should do it. I'm sure at some point you'll describe it in a little bit more detail, but it's a phenomenal project, just in spirit. It's a lovely, lovely project. And it really fits with who we are as a school community. It is really exactly what we do at Da Vinci. It's innovative, it's unique, it is all like really ready, fire, aim, right? We really didn't quite know how things were gonna work and we just like, yes, let's do this. And so I think instead of guiding Julia somewhere else, I said, oh, yeah, here. And that's how we became involved. Maybe there were other schools out there that might want it. I'm genuinely sorry about that. Not sorry, because it really was a beautiful partnership of a project and a school, which is a project-based school, and again, it was a beautiful fit.
Well, she's actually right. I wrote her, and I'll just explain really quickly what the project is, so it's not like a mystery. It has 3 parts. The first part, well, sort of 4 parts. The first part is really getting the kids to talk for a little bit about their feelings about climate change, and not in any way to correct it or change it, just to listen. How do you guys feel about climate change? What are your thoughts about it? The second part is reading. I created this little, a very small chapbook of poems about nature, and not all of them were, actually not most of them were about climate change. They were just about beautiful poems about nature and poems that I love, and teaching them to the kids, and then having the kids write in response to them, a prompt. But then the third part of it was having speakers from the community who are working on projects to mitigate climate change, like on a zero carbon ethanol plant, or someone who works with the state of California, taking methane and from cows and making the disposal of it not just good, but turning it into energy. So there were all these amazing people in our community doing amazing things. And so they came in and talked to the kids about what they were doing. The last part was having the kids record one of their poems into a sound file, putting it on this website, that then geolocated the sound file so that you could walk what we called the Hope River and listen to the kids' poems, which was a really moving, at least for me, experience. So that's the project.
Wow, I'm just writing down geolocating website. that's a brilliant.
I technically be saying it wrong. Ask Alison. I don't really know.
You know, it's funny that you would say that, because I call it Pokemon Go with poems. So I don't think I'm the one to put anything technical in there.
And then ask Amy, because she knows this stuff.
Well, I do want to turn to Amy next, but at first I just want to say, thank you for sharing all the phases of this, Julia, because it just shows how much, I was able to observe some of this in some of your classrooms, and it was just like, it was so moving and incredible to even just listen to the students start expressing their feelings verbally, much less before Anna helped them with all of you, shape them into poems. And the science, the mitigators with solutions was also brilliant. But the school, the coordination it took with schedules, and that was no small task. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, Amy, before bringing you in. So what do you want to add at this point?
Honestly, I would just say a huge thank you to Julia and Allie for being friends in the first place so that this project could happen. I remember it was like a Friday at like 3:45, and Allie, this was last year, and Allie texted me and she's like, so I have this idea and I have this friend who wants to do this project. And I heard like bits and pieces of it, and then to see it all come to light, I think it was a truly moving experience for the students. And I wanted to quote one of our students. She said, no one ever asked me how I feel about these things. And she said, I'm little, and usually people don't ask me how I feel about these things. And she said, this project gave me a voice, which I thought was just so incredible. And we want Julia to come back every single year so we can do this project every single year. And it was so important to the kids to be able to express their feelings, because oftentimes these problems like climate change seem so insurmountable, but to hear the way the kids thought and felt about it was beautiful.
I have goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
Just that quote is just so moving to me, Amy. I can't even tell you.
Yeah. So Anna, how would you like to add at this point of your role, how you were drawn in, and what your focus was during this?
Okay, so hello everyone. So I want to, if I can, start with the closing part, which was us taking the students out onto Hope River, because for me, that was one of the most magical moments, is being able to see the students out in real life on the trail, hearing their poems, to see 100% buy-in on a field trip where students can run around was absolutely empowering. And I had kids in tears listening to some of the other poems, and they're just so empowered, and it was just absolutely magical. But for my involvement in the project was kind of like what was mentioned before, getting the students to create the poetry at the end, that final product, through all of the drafting phases and brainstorms from Julia and then the master poets. We also did a little bit of front loading of figurative language in the beginning. So that was my role.
It was so important though, Anna. I mean, teaching kids poetry is such a huge task, and I had so little time, and Anna made it possible for what I was afraid would be just words on a page to turn into poems. I mean, they're beautiful.
Yeah,
can I
with
add
that.
on here?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Amy.
So in originally talking with Julia, I remember you saying, like, I'm hoping to get like 10 or 15 poems. In our 7th grade class, we have a class of about 120 7th graders. And I think we got over 90 poems. And it's nothing that we didn't tell the kids, you got 20 minutes to write a poem. You have to turn something in. It's just that the project was so engaging that everyone wanted to do it. So I remember Julia setting up the Pokemon Go of poems, if you will. And Julia's like, oh, I got to expand this. Like we have to make even more geolocations. And it literally got to the point where you could walk like 15 steps and there was the next poem and the next poem and the next poem, and the next poem. And it was amazing. Like to have that much buy-in from 12-year-olds meant that this meant something, and that all of the like the teachers that came in and the scientists that came in, like it was all so moving that everyone wanted to participate. And I think poetry, from my personal experience and from hearing from the students, it's super difficult, right? Like you don't want to do it wrong. And poetry, for multiple reasons, feels really hard. But Julia and Allie and Anna, like everyone just made it so accessible to these students that I want everyone to know that Hope River was like way bigger than we thought it would be, because the project was just so enticing to our students.
Well, and I need to mention that there were 2 other poets that worked with me. One was Bethany Humphreys and one was Stanley Zumbiel. And they also taught class sections of the 7th grade, because it was, it's a lot of students. And one of the things I loved were their ideas too. Like we made it available to every kid every time. Whatever they wrote, we would look at, and we would write comments to them and give it back to them the next week. Or we talked a lot between the classes, like, how did this go? What's the best way to approach this poem? What's the best way to approach the prompt? And we made it a very positive, and they were so instrumental in this, in making it a really positive environment for the kids. Like whatever they did, we wanted them to do. There was no in this project. None of them had to write about climate change. And none of them had to write a poem, and they could decide. Well, no, that's not true, because you guys would have graded them down for it. But I told them, however you think of a poem, that's a poem. It can be a haiku. It can be one line. You don't have to do it any certain way. And the permissiveness of it was really important to me, because I felt like that's how you get people over the hump of feeling like you're going to do something wrong. And poetry is a lifelong craft. I mean, I still, like, every day I'm stabbing my head with my pencil going, can't you do better than this? It's just so hard. It's just so unbelievably hard.
And if I could jump in and just add to those already impressive numbers, I think it's true that we do provide them with a grade. And so when we assign something, the hope is that they'll turn it in. The 90 poems that we got were the 90 recordings that we got. We actually got something like 120 out of 124 students who actually wrote poems, which is an incredible number. Again, for a graded assignment, I wish I could say, oh, they turned in all of the graded assignments. This was a particularly amazing display of their turning in work. And I think it was the project. So even when we offer this incentive, we tend to not always get numbers like that. So, and that 90 of them did decide to record it is mind blowing.
That 120 actually wrote out of 124 is mind-blowing. It's incredible. And again, I can merely speak as an occasional observer. I did get to see how all of you are like incredibly responsive, like the listening and the, like Julia saying, there was no, and the atmosphere was positive. I just could feel, while I was in the room, just like this expansion of being accepted. Like it just felt like like seventh graders were like suddenly full, real, total human beings getting the respect. Then they do, I believe, normally get a high level of respect at this school, which I know because both of my children went through these schools. But it was just more than ever. This like, oh, thank God, there's a relief, there's an outlet. I can say this. I won't be judged. I feel loved here. I have to commend you all out loud again. And oh my God, to teach poetry. And then I wanted to go back to Amy about science. And I'm wondering if some of the, and it's worth repeating the mitigation specific projects that the guests, the science lecturers brought the information about. How much did time and energy did it take to coordinate with your curriculum? Was that like a not even necessary or an easy fit, or did it go right into what you were already teaching? I'm just curious about that, especially for other teachers who might be listening from other schools.
Yeah, everything comes back to global warming, right? Like the subjects I teach in seventh grade science are ecology, chemistry, and geography or geology. And all of those topics tie into global warming, and everything has changed because our planet is warming at an alarming rate. And the kids know that. The kids are aware of it. They hear it all the time. They feel the effects of it all the time. So I was in the middle, and we did not plan this, but I was in the middle of my natural disasters unit. And usually, like in years past, I've been an educator for a decade. And usually in years past, students are going back to like the 80s or the 90s to find, the ancient times, to find like a flood that happened or a wildfire that happened. And my kids, as we were doing this, they were like, oh, I'm going to pick this one from last week. Or, oh, there was like the flooding that was happening in Santa Cruz. That was Tuesday. And like it is everywhere. It is all over the news. And so when the kids were both working on natural disasters and how it affects different populations and how our natural hazard responses are extremely inequitable. At the same time, like they were learning that in my class, and then they were talking about like how can we move forward with hope with these science experts. And it was such a relief to like have those both going simultaneously. And I constantly kept thinking, I was like, well, if we did this in ecology unit, like this would also fit here. And if we did this with chemistry and how different elements are leaving our atmosphere at alarming rates, like this would also fit in. And so I think sometimes we're hesitant to talk about global warming or teach about global warming because it's so depressing, right? Like we're spiraling and it feels so heavy. But the kids know about it. They feel it. They feel so heavy about it. And to approach it with this like thoughtful, hopeful lens was so important. And I want to do it forever. Like I never want to change.
Did you want to share who the speakers were or the topics or anything? Because I did print that out.
I do, but I would like actually first to ask Anna a question and then turn back to you to hear more about the science contributors to the project from outside of the school. So Anna, how much experience, because like I've loved writing haikus ever since I was introduced to haiku. Like I think that was in 7th grade. Like haikus are my like go-to, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with my brain or my words. For decades, I've been writing haikus, but that's pretty much the only form of poetry that I will even brave. And the children did so much more than what I've done for decades. So what's your experience with poetry in the past, and how did you do this? I mean, that is like the others have said, that is not an easy task to teach people how to write.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny that you mentioned haikus because that's where we started with our writing. So, as a world studies teacher, I align with our history and we're looking at feudalism in Japan. And we opened the lens as the opportunity to blend this into the curriculum as starting with figurative language in haikus and all the sensory details and the feelings and emotion that happen in so few words and the power and impact that that can have. And then expanded from there. And luckily, with all the brainstorming that happened prior, in all the classes with the experts, we were able to develop some beautiful poems collectively. But my previous experience with poetry, I'm coming from a high school level, coming down to middle school, but I used to do what's called Poetry Out Loud. So Julia, you might be familiar with that. It's a national competition, and that was my lens, like this authentic audience. There's a scholarship component. And every year I would have, like most students do it, but they're like dragging their feet along the way and transitioning to something that's more authentic and letting students really express their voice was way more powerful, and them learning all of the Englishy things that need to go along with teaching it, like the figurative language and the rhyme schemes and free verse, and then being able to use that lens through that authentic product that they're making. And the kids love technology, so they're like, I get to help create an app. Like, yes, this is awesome, let's do it. And they had so much buy-in.
Wow. So it's kind of handy you've had some poetry experience in your background.
Yeah.
Thanks back to you, Julia, because can you just repeat for other people listening what the specific mitigation projects were and the names of the people who brought them to?
Yeah, and Anna, that was so interesting. Like, I didn't know that. I loved hearing that. So this was honestly the hardest part, was finding speakers and coordinating them. And I even got so desperate I was willing to pay people to come do this, which most of these people really didn't need to be paid, but it was so hard to find people. So I was really happy with the speakers. I ended up relying on friends. So the first one is Neil Curler, who's we went to college together, and he is amazing. He started this ethanol business a long time ago, but now he did a talk on driving to zero carbon with ethanol. And I actually want him to do a talk to every single class, because he was brilliant in how he explained the carbon cycle. He talked about it as an imbalance, and he just was so lively about it. I learned so much. And then I had Elizabeth Hirsch from Tree Davis talking about how urban trees help fight climate change. And then Yvonne Hunter came and talked about solar power. Hope means acting locally. And Sarah Oster-Ramimi, who was a postgraduate student at UC Davis, talked about her research on California wildfires and biofuel. And then another friend I leaned on was my friend Casey Cady, who worked for years in the state government on methane reduction in dairy cattle. And then we had the very famous Stanley Robinson come in and talk about what geoengineering is and can it work. Again, leaning on my friends. And Jeff Flynn, who runs the UC Dade Bus Center, talked about Unitrans' electric future and how they're electrifying all their buses. Jennifer Gilbert came in and talked about slowing climate change by sorting waste. And Asia Jones, another graduate student, talked about montane meadows and carbon sinks. And I just thought they were all pretty remarkable.
That is phenomenal. In 5 weeks? Did this all happen in 5 weeks? Is that true?
6, 5.5. Well, I think 5 weeks of instruction, right? And then 1 week for the field, 1 week maybe for getting the poetry books together, and then a field trip.
But that was one class every 5 weeks.
Yes, one class every 5. That's just, imagine the exposure these students have had that so many of their peers across the country won't yet, unless we get this all over the country and the world. I'm thinking of, this is really a goofy question, but I want to, we'll talk more about, I really want to talk more about the technological part, the walk, and I'm going to save time for you all to read some poems, because the audience should hear the moving brilliance that these so many 12-year-olds created. with your permission and support. But Allie, this is a goofy question, but given all that you've been teaching for over 30 years, what did you learn like from this project that as a teacher, even you hadn't experienced before?
So I definitely learned, we talk about ready, fire, aim. It's the second time I've said that. We spend a lot of time thinking about things, but we don't have to wait for them to be all done before we just dive in. And we really didn't know we knew what was going to happen at the end. None of us, I don't think, really kind of knew how. And I think one of the things that I learned, and it's also a very different way to do a project, right? Rather than taking 3 or 6 weeks to do a project and doing something every day, we split it up between 3 different courses, and we just did 1 day of instruction each week. I think what I learned, again, is just that flexibility, and that this is all going to work out. This is all going to come together at the end. And it just was so much fun. It was so different. It was such a place where we could just hear the students and hear what they were thinking. And it was always amazing that at the end of even just a short discussion and reading a poem, and even I think they had maybe between 5 to 7 minutes to write, at the end, one of the poet teachers would say, who would like to read their poems? And I was expecting different, I was definitely expecting to hear poems, but there were poems, there were just like, let me just open my heart to you. Let me just dig really deep. And after writing for 7 minutes, let me just give you this beauty. I guess a very long way to get to that point. That would be it, that when something is so inspiring and so well done and it touches at the very core of someone, incredible things can happen in 5 to 7 minutes.
Well, that summary in itself is really beautiful. And it inspires me to give Amy and Anna also a chance to just answer that question before we go to the technological discussion and the reading. So, Amy, what did you learn from this, you think?
To totally echo Allie, we have to not be afraid to have hard conversations or like broach hard topics with students, because their thoughts are valid, they're worth it, they're inspiring, they're motivating. Julia can attest to this. There was one session where this student who is usually like totally quiet, totally reserved, doesn't normally raise their hand, was like, I'd like to read my poem. And I had to like step out of classroom because I will not cry in front of these children. And I just got so moved by it. And like, I think sometimes as teachers, we get so worried about making a project perfect and we like nitpick the fine details. But this was truly like throwing some spaghetti against the wall and seeing like, oh, that really worked. And I truly feel like Julia gave us the room to like explore and make things like extend upon things or shorten things up. And the kids ran with it. Like I was so impressed by what they were able to create. And I think that my biggest lesson I learned from this is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Like it does not have to be perfect, but when you let them have the space to talk about things they really care about, like global warming, like racial injustice, like the gun problem that we have in this country, like when you give them the time to talk about those hard things, they have these big feelings that come out and the conversations can be so beautiful.
I'm sorry. The only word coming to me is wow again. Thank you. How about you, Anna? What's your big learning from this experience?
Well, no pressure from those two fabulous descriptions there, but just echoing what was already said is that if you think about a student's day, especially at our campus, we have a 7-period day. Like you think about the amount of time that these students have to speak on things that they want to speak about, it's very minuscule, like let alone even speak in general. And then having this platform where they get to talk about it. Like, we have to give students this opportunity. So being able to let loose, I'm a very type A teacher, but being able to let loose, let them have that freedom is so much fun and absolutely worth it. And I know as and the one who had the students write in my class. So Allie did all the recording, which I bet was super fun and stressful on its own, but having the writing and then having the students get in that writer's block, kind of like Julie was saying, like, oh my gosh, I could do better. And just trying to coach them through, like, it is okay. Like, these are your feelings, just write. Like, just get it on paper. We will format it. We will make it pretty. We will add in the imagery and everything that you want to have to express your voice. And like, though numbers were brought up before saying like, okay, 120 in my classroom when they're writing a poetry with 100% engagement 100% of the time, which I haven't had on all of the projects that I've had in my class. And it's just part of the structure. And they knew, our 7th grade students, that they were the guinea pigs in this brainchild. And it is definitely going to stick with them, I think, the rest of their lives, that they had this opportunity.
I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps. Thank you, Anna. So, Julia, what was it like for you to watch this unfold and come into fruition?
Well, first, I just want to say I am so moved by the things you teachers have said. I'm actually kind of shocked. It didn't look so pretty from where I stood. I mean, I've never taught junior high. I love junior high kids because they're so weird. I mean, they're like little and big all at once, and they're fascinating and annoying is, I won't say a bad word, but and I found it, first of all, I loved working with the teachers. I found the whole thing really nerve-wracking and frightening. I promise you I was not throwing spaghetti on the wall. I tried to figure out every detail I could and nail it down and talk to the other poet teachers about it. And I mean, there was so much planning and organization going into it. It really did not feel like spaghetti. It felt really hard. But listening to you guys, I'm so touched. Like, I had no idea. I really didn't. I didn't know what to compare it with. Like, I've never done this before. To think that you guys think this really made a difference means so much to me. I don't know if it's okay to jump into the next thing too, which is that we were given this amazing opportunity. I didn't know that it mattered that much to the kids. I really didn't. And I'm so touched. And it's just amazing to hear it. It's going to take me a long time to sort of process how moved I am by hearing that. So, yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
It is amazing. Thank you so much. And Amy, thank you for mentioning other issues that are weighing so heavily on all of our generations, but especially the youth, all the major, the gun violence for one. And I happen to live between 2 schools, and I hear the practicing of teacher down, earthquake, stranger on campus with a gun. I don't know the right names, but it's intense. It's intense. And to think about all the things they're coping with. Once now we need more projects like this to go into the other areas. But right now, let's talk for a few minutes, because I'm saving the last 10 minutes to hear poems you guys have chosen and have permission to read, because they're already recorded. The students have already agreed to be published. But before we do that, and then hopefully have a little bit of time to talk about what it's like even reading those and hearing those, the technological part is so amazing. And I love Alison's name, Pokemon Go. Pokey Hope River Go. I don't know. Can you just tell us a little bit? Because it took me a long time to figure out, like, wait a minute, how does that work? Wait, do we download an app? Or wait a minute, it's a website, so people on their phone can download the website, and then they have to go to the physical location. Anybody want to take the technical part for a minute?
Well, I can only explain the conceptual part of it. I have no idea how it happens.
Okay.
But conceptually, so it was impossible to find someone to help me do this. I really wanted to pay someone. But another friend who's just the amazing human being is a professor at American River College. And for a long time, he ran the design hub there. And he's an engineer. He had all these engineering students. And he assigned one of them to come up a way to figure out how to do this for me. He said she wants for the students to be able to walk along and on their iPhones, hear the different kids' poems read to them. And he said, "Oh, I can do that. That's easy." It wasn't exactly easy. There were a lot of glitches, but what he came up with was, you do download an app. It connects you to a website. There's different ways to use the website. The one way to use the website that I wanted was that when you get to certain coordinates, which the website recognizes, it pulls down that particular sound file. And then through your phone, you hear it reading that particular poem to you. There are other ways to get that app where you can actually hear all of the poems read by the kids on the on your app without being there.
Oh, great.
But that's how it works right now conceptually. I don't know if anyone can explain to you how the heck it's programmed or whatever. I don't know that.
I think it's magic. I think it's magic.
Perfect. Thank you. And we just have about 9 minutes left. So before we turn to reading poems, I wanted to ask Julia, can people, some of our listeners are on radio, through radio and audio, and some are viewing. So can you type in, is there a way, can people contact you to ask you about this project if they're interested in trying to design something else, something like this, or contact you about this? And if so, could you say out loud how they can reach you? And then maybe we can type it in too.
Sure. So I'll give you my email.
Okay.
And then I am going to need to talk about this other project because it's the materials I designed are going to be published in a chapbook of, I think it's 20 poems we selected from kids who submitted their poems to this chapbook. And so if somebody really does want to do this project, they can use all my materials. Just maybe it would be nice to give me credit, but other than that, they're welcome to use whatever they want. And so there's a lot of unknowns. Like, I don't know when the chapbook's coming out. We're just debating right now the name of it. So I don't even have that.
Okay.
But I can give you my email. So where do I type it? Into the chat?
Well, I think I typed it. It's the same one I've been using.
Well, actually, I'd prefer to use a different one if it's okay.
Okay. Well, if you can say it out loud so the radio listeners can hear it, I'll try to type it while you're saying it.
It's really simple. It's just my name, Julia, Julia, at Omsoft, which is O as in orange, M as in mother, S as in snake, O as in orange, F as in Frank, T as in Tom.com. So Julia at omsoft.com.
I think I got it.
I mean, I would love other people to do this. This really was a pilot project. And my thought was, I really do hope people want to keep doing projects like this because kids really need a place to feel like, A, grown-ups care what they think, B, grown-ups are not as clueless as they think we are, and C, there's hope. They really need to feel that.
Yes, and thank you for the contact information, and thank you to our sound engineer who just posted it for anybody who has the visuals. And I just saw, Amy, please, would you like to add something really quick before we read?
Yes, I have to jump in right here because Allie and Anna did all the hard work and I got the fun job of asking kids how they felt about the project at the end. And literally every single student said that not only did they want to do it again, they wanted to revise their poems when they got older. So as 7th graders, they wanted to revise them again. As 9th graders, 10th graders, 12th graders, they wanted to have a running record. And instead of just going around a park, they wanted to go around the whole town. I truly cannot emphasize to Julia enough about how big this got because it was so engaging and because it meant so much to them to be able to hear something. So I really need you to know how powerful it was. And to hear students say, like, we want to design the app next time. We want it to go around the whole town. I had a student say that he wanted to make it like mandatory that you have to listen to the poem, like it'll pop up like an Amber Alert. Stop, read my poem. And they were so into it. And I just can see this project getting really big. And it was a privilege to be a part of it.
And now I was remiss for not naming, what is the name of the website?
The website. Oh, Hope River, but
Okay.
I'm not
Let's just-
really clear how I'm not good at the publicity part of this.
That's okay.
Exactly.
Well, just for anyone listening, Hope River, just see if you can find it, okay? Because you will not regret it, and you will be talking about it. So we have about 5 minutes left. I was hoping to save more, but let's just go and maybe we can close with you, Julia. Allie, are you ready to read a poem?
I am. And this is written by one of those students who, again, every single class without fail, 7 minutes after she started writing, things like this came out. This is called Haunted by the Past. The mistakes of the previous generation are haunting the new coming. We watch as the world crumbles and hallucinate, thinking it's just peaches and rainbows. As long as we wait, the worse it will get, sooner than you know it. The rainbows will fade into dark gloom and peaches will rot. The pollution in our air is suffocating. The beauty of the glimmering ocean is slowly washed away by gasoline, broken glass, dead fish. The alluring, beautiful blue ocean was so bright and light it glistened in the sun, shining like new silverware. Snap out of it. Looks more like sewage water. Its color is like a trashy greenish brown. The smell of dead fish, their eyes are lifeless and foggy, like the world after it's been worked to death for centuries. The toxic spray of gasoline that we ride around carelessly. The fresh air that is now toxic. I have so much to say, but saying it isn't enough because no one will listen to my words. Almost like the ones who care are muted, as if it was just a show. They silent us out, but we won't be silenced without a fight. At least, I hope.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
I would agree.
For the sake of time, Amy, can you please read yours?
Absolutely. Birches bring cool shade and papery white trunks. Roots search underneath the soil endlessly for anything. Water hidden deep in the damp, spongy dirt. Twisted branches of juniper sprawl across the desert landscape, bringing cool relief to scampering little lizards and an occasional shadowy raven. A cactus acts as a silent company to a little fallen periwinkle berries. Ginkgo leaves shaped like tiny tassels, golden and lining that street. What about pines? Needles shifting in the breeze, blowing the welcoming piney scent through the living, laughing air across the lake, giving us massive, crunching pine cones that look almost skeletal, quaking aspens as a single organism, their interconnected roots covered with rich earth, overgrown with soft lavender sprigs of lupine, while the topmost branches sway and rustle, hiding the little songbirds and chittering squirrels. I look up, I breathe, and I know, long after I am plucked from the face of the earth, they will keep living and growing, unless we first tear their roots from the soil, planting identical, grim apartments instead of paving broad, black roads over their graves. But there is still hope. The forest lives on.
Both of them mentioned hope. Thank you so much. We have about a minute and a half. So Anna, do you want to try to read? And then we probably might need to wrap up. Julia, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a minute to read it. Mine was a little bit longer, but I can read the last little chunk of it.
That would be great.
Is that okay?
Then we need to wrap up.
Okay, perfect. So this one was called Drowning. It sets up an exposition about the waves and it's beautiful. And then the humans come in. I sense disaster escalating. It has already begun. I have been watching the humans as they play in my waves, boil me to make noodles, sail on me in ships, as they build dams to constrict me, as their cars and factories emit smoke, smoke that fills the sky. And as they run their cars and factories, I grow higher, my ice melts, I grow warmer, but they keep running along my beaches, oblivious to the damage they're creating. Some just don't care. What lengths will it go to before they realize their mistakes and clean the pollution from my waves?
Thank you so much. Julia, I'm sorry you don't get the last word after all, but Julia Levine, Alison Kimmel, Amy Hannon-Korynta, Anna Kieschnick, thank you so much. And thank you to the sound engineer. Thank you to listeners and viewers. Thank you, Dean, our producer. And everyone, be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Talk4 TV or w4cy.com to It's Your Voice. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week. Thank you.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate